Again, my name is Basil Smikle. For those that don't know, I am a professor of practice and director of the nonprofit management program in the School of Professional Studies at Columbia University. And we are uh, undertaking this uh, project, if you will, a director's lunch, if you will, brown bag. We're going to try and do this once a month so that we can invite leaders in the nonprofit space to talk to our students and alum and any individuals that are also interested in the nonprofit program. That way, you get to really understand the work that not only it is taking place here in New York City and around the world, but for those who are students, you have an opportunity to learn from some of the best and brightest in our field. And for those who are professionals, hopefully we be able to go through some best practices to get, to be able to help you in the work that you're currently doing. But we also want to make sure that this is a partnership. This is a partnership and a collaboration between the school, our students and faculty, and the professionals that do this work day to day. So I'm really glad to have, as I mentioned, former New York City Commissioner Gary Jenkins join us today. So before he and I get into our conversation, I want to make sure that everybody is aware of some of the events that we're doing in the nonprofit management program. Coming up on October 21st, we have a prospective a webinar for prospective international students. So we're looking at October 21st, and that is at 9 a.m. We're doing this in part with the admissions office. It's the International Student and Scholars Office. So for helpful information for any international students, that is October 21st. October 23rd, how Columbia Student Financial Services can support your educational goals. That is at 9 a.m. That is an online event, as is the October 21st event. And October 24th, we have a career design lab to support your professional goals. That's a 9 a.m. event, also online. You can also look to us for more information on that. November 11th, we're doing an event to help you advance your career in nonprofit management. So insights and strategies with the Career Design Lab again, November 11th, again online. We have an open house for all of SPS on November 12th. That is an admissions event in Lerner Hall in the Aldridge Auditorium. And December 4th, we do have an information session about the Masters in Nonprofit Management program. You will have actually some interesting talkback conversation that we're putting together now. So it won't be just an informational session. It'll also give you an opportunity to really engage a leader in the nonprofit space. And I'm excited to invite Grace Bonilla, who is the head of the United Way of New York. Really excited about that. She's a good friend, and we're really excited to have that conversation. Before I go deeper into December, I should go back and say that on November 25th, another friend of mine, I'm bringing a lot of friends to me today. A good friend of mine, Rich Baum, who I've known almost my entire career, he now the CEO of Education Alliance. He'll be with us with a similar online conversation as we're about to take part in today. So we have a lot of events coming up, a lot of really exciting stuff that I'm hoping that I can see all of you at, and I hope all of you take part in. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach us here at the Nonprofit Management Office. There are two individuals that I want to thank in particular in that office, in our office, Lonnie Ryan and Vicki Klesick, without whom none of this could be possible. So thank you, Lonnie and Vicki. I also want to say a thank you to Andy at our SPS events team for the work that you do to get us all up and running. So thank you all for this wonderful event. And let's get right into it. I do want to thank and say hello to, again, my friend Gary P. Jenkins. He is the Chief Administrative Officer of Urban Pathways and a former New York City Commissioner at the Department of Social Services. Gary, thank you so much for being here. How are you, sir?
Thank you so much, Beza. Really appreciate it. And I'm excited to be here this afternoon.
Man, thank you. So, I'm uh, I want to begin at the beginning. So, where are you from? Tell us about your path.
Absolutely. I am the youngest child of eight, born and raised in Brooklyn, was raised in a single parent household, grew up on public assistance. Back then it was, welfare. We lived in a shelter for a little over a year due to a fire that was, that we occurred in our house. But we were and are a tight-knit family. My mom, may she rest in peace, instilled in us that we need to, be together, love one another, and just, be grounded in how we interact externally. What really brought me to this work is, going down to the location with my mom when she did recertifications, was looking at the families that were being served there and how they were being treated. And it was not the best, I have to admit. But with one of the caseworkers, interacting with her, what she said to me was, Gary, be the change in your family's trajectory. And that stuck with me, Basil. It really, resonated with me. And I said I wanted to always give back. So how did that happen? In 1985, a little over, 38 years ago, I became what was called a house parent with the ACS, the Administration for Children's Services with the city. And, that was my way of giving back to kids who were entering the foster care system, with being taken away from, their household situation. And we were the first interaction that these young people came into contact with. From there, I became an eligibility specialist at the New York City Human Resources Administration. And that's where I really wanted to be, because that was the Department of Social Services and is the Department of Social Services. And I felt as though I was turning the wheel, so to speak, and really starting from the beginning, from when my family was receiving benefits from that very same organization. And I stayed there for 36 years. Started out again as an eligibility specialist, then became a supervisor, then became a manager, and went through the series of different levels of management, until I became the commissioner under Mayor Eric Adams, when he appointed me for the Department of Social Services, which consisted of both the Human Resources Administration and the Department of Homeless Services. And I always tell folks it's really three agencies that commissioner leads, because it's the Department of Social Services is the umbrella, and then underneath you have the Human Resources Administration and the Department of Homeless Services. The Department of Social Services, they have all of the support areas, the finance, human resources, accounting, and compliance. So that responsibility was vast. We had a staff of around 16,000 individuals that we were responsible for, a caseload of over 3 million New Yorkers who were and are in receipt of public assistance, which consists of cash assistance, SNAP, public health insurance, adult protective services, domestic violence, fair fares, believe it or not, also falls under HRA, and a plethora of other programs that support New Yorkers who are in need of those services. So, I was grounded in that type of professional upbringing. It was important to me to always wake up in the morning with a purpose, and with a mission. And the Department of Social Services gave me that. So I woke up every morning excited to go into the office and help New Yorkers who are in need.
I love the fact that you mentioned purpose and mission. We talk a lot about that in our program and in our coursework. So thank you. We didn't coordinate it, but I'm glad to know that you co-signed so much of what you do. Before I go further, I just wanted to highlight Vicky's point in the chat that we are open to questions. So please feel free to use the Q&A to ask any of us questions, and I'll be sure to monitor that and make and get questions out to the commissioner here. But you've left and you are now at is it Urban Pathways?
Urban Pathways. I retired from government a little over maybe a year and a half ago, after doing 36 years. And I said before I had left government, I was going to be the head of the department and help my family, and I achieved that goal. I did a 1 year stint doing consulting work and really working with the nonprofits in New York City because again, I had to wake up with a purpose, and I recognized that nonprofits is really the backbone of delivering services to communities who are in need. Did that for a year, but again, I wanted to be involved and have direct impact on the families that are being served by the nonprofits. So helping them establish, protocols, looking at their organizational structure was wonderful. But I always felt as though I didn't want to leave that office because I had to go to the next client. I wanted to stay to help them and be involved. And then the opportunity came up at Urban Pathways, and they were looking for their first chief administrative officer. And being in government for those years, just watching how Urban Pathways, what they did, how they went about serving New Yorkers who are in need, it just drew me there. So at Urban Pathways, again, I'm the CAO. It's a wonderful organization. We're developers. We develop permanent housing and supportive housing for folks who are formerly homeless. So again, if you see, it brings me right back to really working with those most vulnerable New Yorkers. And it's great. We have drop-in centers. We bring homeless folks inside, work with them, accept them for who they are and where they are in their journey, not forcing them to submit to sobriety tests or putting curfews when they can come in and what time they have to leave. We accept them for who they are. And that's what Urban Pathways is about. And we're about to embark on our 50th anniversary of existence of delivering services to New Yorkers.
I want to come back to that because it's such amazing and important work. But before we speak about where you are in more detail about where you are now, I want to go back to your work as a commissioner. Now, it occurred to me that you were in a position where you were writing a lot of grants, I imagine, and working with a lot of nonprofits and contracted with a lot of nonprofits or or working with other agencies. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, we worked really deeply with nonprofits. And I'm going to say this not because I'm now in the nonprofit world, but the city really can't operate efficiently and effectively without our nonprofit partners. They are the backbone of delivering services. They're in the communities. The folks in the communities trust the nonprofits because, again, when you're in government, you're in government. And folks have some distrust with government, but the nonprofits are on the ground in the communities. So we had grants and we had RFPs, and we worked with the nonprofits who apply for the RFPs. It was great because a number of nonprofits, they kind of mastered how to work with government. And I'm not going to name one in particular, but one particular organization really developed a deep relationship with the agencies. And when I say a deep relationship, understanding what was our mission, what was our vision, and it's still in alignment, right? It's helping New Yorkers who are in need, but they really took the time to cultivate that relationship with the management team, understanding where we want it to go. And I think that's key. And I think a lot of nonprofits have really capitalized on that way of thinking and building that relationship. So they worked with us. They understood how we wanted to get things done. So when it came time for those grants to be developed, and when you write in the grant, you're really looking at what services can be provided to New Yorkers, protecting New Yorkers' money, because that's the bottom line. You want to make sure that you're being a responsible steward of the funds, but also making sure that the funds are being delivered to those who are being serviced by those funds.
Now, let's drill down a little bit. But and by the way, if anybody has any other questions, because that raised a ton of questions for me. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A and we'll get right to them. Let me drill down a little bit. What does that relationship building look like? Is it just the leaders, the executive directors of these organizations saying, "Hey, can we get coffee with the commissioner?" How does that tell us more about what a nonprofit leader needs to do to kind of really understand the work that the city does to be able to help them apply for those grants?
So in the administration, we invited folks to City Hall. We invited the nonprofits to City Hall to sit down and just have a frank conversation. What's working? What's not working? How do we work together? And having those discussions, and like I said, I was in government for 36 years. I've been in previous administrations. I've seen a lot of lip service, right? You come, you have a one-time meeting, then you come back around a year later, a year and a half later, follow up on that discussion. That was not my experience as commissioner. We really sat down with our nonprofits, listened, heard what they had to say. They heard us around the table, and then they went back to their individual organizations and said, okay, what can we do to improve our relationship? But more importantly, how can we work together and partner to make sure that we're in alignment with what the Department of Social Services is trying to do? If it was, really focused on mental health and people who are homeless, unhoused, I will call them, with mental illness, opposed to just walking past those individuals, let's really drill down and understand why they are in that position and how, as government, can help. But again, government couldn't do it alone. We needed our nonprofits who has the capacity and the expertise and the resources to deliver those services. So it was really just coming together and then following up because we had the meeting at City Hall. Let's have these sub meetings, these other conversations outside of the larger meeting to work towards that ultimate goal.
And do you feel that what were some of the biggest this is a two-part question. What were some of the biggest concerns that the nonprofits had working with government? And similarly, what were some of the issues that you all may have raised with the nonprofit saying this is the kind of thing you need to get better at?
I mean, from the nonprofit perspective, and it still exists today, it was payment, right? They delivered the services, they were on the ground, they were fulfilling their obligation, and city was lagging in payment to continue for the nonprofit to give those services because no one works for free, right? We all wake up with that, like I said, that purpose and that mission, but we also have to pay our bills and feed our families. So really not having the ability to get paid on time, that's something that the nonprofits came to the table with. From government side, it was really understanding how can we assist the nonprofits in delivering those services and making sure that they were in alignment with us, with what we wanted as government to fulfill our obligation to the people that we serve, and how can we ensure that the nonprofits was getting what they needed, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
it does. What were some of so when you're looking at creating these partnerships and writing the RFPs and the grants, what are some of the things that you look for? What are some of the things that you keep in mind that would help a nonprofit applying to be, how could they be successful? Like, what are some of the things you look for?
Being clear on your true capacity, how much you can deliver, what do you if being clear on in your response on how the services will be delivered, how frequent, what staffing is needed, what level of staffing is needed, what expertise, if you need a licensed social worker, if you need a licensed medical doctor. We always look for those type of responses, and the RFP and the responses to our grants wanted to really drill down to make sure that they were successful. And we made sure we would look through and had these conversations, bring folks to the room so we can have a Q&A before it officially becomes an RFP. And we want to make sure that we were following the rules and making sure that we were in alignment with the rules that was set out. But prior to the release of the RFP, really understanding from the nonprofits what do you need and how we can help.
And RFP, for those that don't know, there probably aren't that don't, but just in case, is request for proposals. And that is government saying that we have some money to spend, right? And on a very specific purpose with very specific guidelines, and apply to be able to do this, to receive this contract. And so as you talk to nonprofits, do you feel, because this is a really interesting point that you raise, do you feel that a lot of them overpromise on their capacity and ability to do things?
I didn't feel they overpromise. I felt that their hearts and their mission was in the right place. And it starts off small, and because of the need is so great, they begin to take on the additional that perhaps they can't handle that workload. But because they're in the business of helping people, sometimes it's difficult or challenging to say no.
Yeah.
So just from my position as the commissioner, it was really having those conversations, saying, yes, we need the help, but you should not take this on because I'm already observing that you're at capacity.
Good question. Good point, because it raises a great question. Now, what are the sort of benchmarks, checkpoints? Like how do you monitor the organization's success or failure? Like, what do you check in regularly, or what does that look like? And how do you I don't want to say micromanage, but you understand my point. Like, what does this sort of check-in look like?
I mean, from government, you have your compliance team and you're monitoring how things are progressing. Are they meeting those benchmarks that was in the RFP that they responded to and said, yes, this is what we want to do? At times it gets busy and government work is busy, a lot going on, but you have this competent, I'm going to say in the Department of Social Services, they have a very competent accountability office, and you monitor what was said in the contract, again, the benchmarks that should be met, and having those conversations with the nonprofits. Even in our the employment program, we had a plethora of grants that we work with different vendors, and what was built in was a regular scheduled check-in with those vendors. And you have your scorecard, and you sit down and you have those discussions and say, okay, this is where you should be. This is where you are. Bravo, you surpassed the benchmark. Or how can we help you get to where you should be at this point in time? So again, it was those regular check-ins that was really helpful to ensure that the nonprofit was being successful.
All right. We do have a question from Kiana Simmons. Hello, and thank you for the question. The question is, and thank you so much for speaking with us today. I recently launched my nonprofit, and I'm bootstrapping our operations through personal funds. In our infancy stage, with your experience as a grant writer, how do you suggest employing grant writers, and is there a standard for compensating them that you're aware of?
So thank you for that question, Kiana, and congratulations on starting your nonprofit. I would say you have to really look and seek a great grant writer, or somebody that can respond to the grants. There are different resources out there. I say definitely look at the agency, Small Business Solutions, SBS, see what they have to offer. You can go right online, nyc.gov, go to SBS, and see what services they have to offer to assist you in that effort. Government, they do offer a lot of free services because, again, they want the nonprofits to be successful because they know they need you. They need us in this field to deliver the work that they don't have the capacity to deliver. But I will caution you and say, like I said earlier, don't take on too much that you can't handle.
And and I want to go back to that point a little bit. The how do you work? And I know you have these regular check-ins and so on, but what are some of the worst practices, the not good practices that you've seen over the course of your career that nonprofits do? You mentioned this sort of taking on a lot of work that they are not unable to do, even though their heart's in the right place. But what are some of the things that a lot of nonprofits do that you know wish they didn't when it comes to actual grant writing, when it comes to applying for grants? So you as a grant maker, sort of, what do you see out there that you're like, I can't, you know, you guys got to stop doing this?
It's really if you don't have the infrastructure, the appropriate infrastructure in place, really ask yourself, can I deliver? What we saw was, you can have, again, to Kiana's point, a great um, response to the grant. You have someone really write it up really well, but if you can't deliver on those services that you promised when you reacted to that grant or RFP, you're going to fail. And that's what we saw. We accepted the folks that responded because the responses were accurate. But when it came time to deliver and meet those benchmarks, that's where they failed.
Yeah. And is there something specific that you look for? In, like, for example, could you tell when an organization doesn't have the capacity to do something, even though it says it does? Are there certain, you know, tells that you look for in a nonprofit that say, you know, great work, but this group can't manage this project or wouldn't have the capacity? Are they like certain tells?
I mean, we go based on, what folks apply for and what they tell us in their responses. In the back end, we will evaluate. New York City is a large city, but it's small when it comes to nonprofits.
Mm,
So when a new nonprofit comes along, of course, we want to look how long you've been in existence, and then look at your wins, look at your challenges, and then really determine based on the need of that particular response for the grant or the RFP. Then we say, okay, more than likely this organization can handle our volume, or they haven't been around long enough. Perhaps they should be a subcontractor and work with a
mm.
prime to get that experience and to get a better understanding on how services are delivered and what capacity you need, what staffing you need in place, what officers you need in place. Do they have a compliance officer? Do you have an auditor? Do you have a controller? Do you have the checks and balances in place at the nonprofit to ensure that you are meeting the requirements of that grant?
Dan has an interesting question. Having now been through several RFP cycles in homeless services myself, I'm noticing a dual need, meeting the mandate of older grants, but also demonstrating continued need for more capacities, aka funding. How would you suggest nonprofits navigate these contraposed incentives over a long time scale? Love that question.
I love it as well. Just again, be mindful of on what you can handle. You have older contracts that you were granted. You still have to fulfill that obligation. But then again, there's always a need. The city's going to put out additional needs, like additional RFPs, additional grants, and you have to know what you can handle. And I would say I'm going to use the G word. Don't be greedy. If you can't handle the volume, don't apply for it. We I know your heart is in the right place and you want to help, but that's what get a lot of nonprofits in trouble because they can't deliver on what they promised.
And is it a situation where, and just I'm asking not because I don't know, but it you know, just helpful to just spell it out. You know, do you look at, I mean, I'm sure you check track record, right, for the monies that you have already given out. Do you how much do you look at, um, how, how can I say this? Do you ever say to yourself, you know, we've given this group a lot of money, and while they may be doing some good things, we need to let them finish what they're doing before we give them more? Or do you sort of say, you know, they've been working with us well so far, let's just keep going? You understand? Like, is there a moment where you stop and say, we need to spread this out a little bit more, or do you just keep going to where you've had success?
The city is always looking for new talent, especially within the MWBE arena, minority Black owned enterprise businesses. Um, we should say to an organization, yes, we know you're great, but you're at capacity and we shouldn't give you any more. Does that always happen, Basil? I'm going to sit here and say no, that does not. Organizations they give grants and it's challenging, but there's also a great need that the city is mandated through rules and regulations that they have to meet the mandate, they have to meet the needs of the underserved, and organizations come forth and then they receive the grants. And again, that's where you as a nonprofit leader need to really ask yourself, can I do this? Can my organization handle this additional volume?
And
That's
do you?
one of the things, I'm sorry, Basil.
No, no, go ahead.
That's one of the things I really appreciate about Urban Pathways. Our CEO is Fred Shack. Fred would say, listen, we cannot take this on. This is something that, yes, we believe in, we want to be there, but we need to make sure that we have the proper resources internally in order to handle it.
Now, one of the things that, especially since you're now out of government and in the nonprofit, you talk a little bit more about how a grant maker can improve the relationship with nonprofits to make a bigger impact. Like, is there a way that now you as a nonprofit would want a grant maker to do something that can help you make a bigger impact?
I mean, I would love for the grant makers to just continue to have conversations with the nonprofits, right? Again, relationship building is critical. And I think folks take it for granted. Not building that relationship, not affording the grant maker to understand your particular mission and how you deliver your work and invite those organizations, the grant maker, to your organization to say,
Mm.
let me give you a tour. Let me explain to you how we deliver our work. Let me show you the impact that it has on individuals and families, right? Because we work primarily with individuals, solely with individuals. We don't work with families with children. We work with individuals. But bringing those grant makers to our locations, speaking with the staff, running through our program, but more importantly, having a conversation with the clients that we serve is very impactful. And
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 that,
and nonprofits need to take advantage of that.
so, and in a sort of a related point, because as you're talking about relationships, I mean, you worked for government, now you're in the nonprofit space specifically, but while you were in government, you answered to a mayor, you were appointed by a mayor, but you also had a city council and you had state legislators. What is that like, trying to provide grants to organizations that might be the favorites of some elected officials out there? How do you talk to elected officials about the grants that you make? Do they come to you a lot and lobby you to, support this organization and that organization?
I spoke to everyone. Okay.
Okay.
It was just about, making sure the lines of communication were open, making sure that they understood from government what we were doing. But the elected officials, I also referred our vendors to the elected officials because they have budgets, they have
Mm.
discretionary funding. And I'm like, listen, I know with our funding from government, there's a lot of rules and there's a lot of restrictions in place. But if you want to do something innovative, then you need to go outside, raise funds, through philanthropic efforts, but also through discretionary funding, through your local city council member. Have those conversations. Again, invite them to your organization. Now that I'm in the nonprofit world, I have a really good relationship with a lot of elected officials. I'm saying come to Urban Pathways. Come
Mm.
see our work on the ground. Let me explain to you the initiatives that we put in place, the pilots that we put in place, how it's going to help your constituents. Because we have to realize the elected officials are there to serve their constituency. So
And
I applaud and say, listen, nonprofits, you're listening to me today, build that relationship with your elected officials.
it sounds like there's also a really strong a need for I mean, you may not have it internally, but sort of a marketing function and a political function. Even though you're a nonprofit, you can't be overtly political. But there's a government relations piece and there's a communications piece that gets to be really critical to the work, I imagine.
Absolutely. I mean, we are in their communities, right? We're in the districts. I said, urban pathways. We're building permanent and supportive housing and drop-in centers in their communities. You want to have that open dialogue to say, hey, how can we help you, and vice versa. We're in this together. We're in for the same reason.
Do the electeds, is there any pressure from them to support anybody specific, and how do you deal with that
I mean,
when you were on the government side, when you were doling out grants?
I fortunately did not experience like, oh, we have favorites. It was really about how can we deliver for our constituents. And when they called me to say, Commissioner Jenkins, we need to have a discussion, it was always based on what services can you bring to our community to help our constituents. That's what I experienced.
Mhm. Now, you mentioned urban pathways. I want to get into that a little bit in your work, but how could you before I get into the substance of your work, I wanted to talk about the politics of your work because I imagine that you were there at the beginnings of the migrant crisis, if I understand, yeah, right? And having to engage contracts related to that. And concerning the work that you do now, how do you deal with the local pushback, if any, to the good work, to the work where your heart's in the right place, right? Like, how do you deal with a lot of uh, pushback that may occur because of, as you say, you're in people's communities. There may be people that don't want you in their community.
I made it with pushback, basically.
Yeah,
I'm pushing back. I'm working on behalf of those who are in need of services. And we all, as New Yorkers, should be there to help those who are in need, period. Um,
yeah.
and, and you can have the NIMBYs to say, not in my neighborhood. I appreciate what you're doing. I want to be supportive, but don't bring it here. This is a shared effort throughout the city. The nonprofits, the organizations that particularly deal with the homeless population, no one wakes up, and I say this always, no one wakes up or no one is born and say, the parents like, oh, I want us to be homeless. No, it happens. These are New Yorkers. These are our brothers and sisters. We have to be there to support one another. And, I meet those conversations with what's the solution besides not in my neighborhood? How
Mhm.
can how can we as the collective address this issue, address this concern, address the crisis?
And at Pathways, tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how your day to day. What's your day to day like, and um, how do you now go and ask your, maybe not specifically you, but you're now on the side of this equation where you're asking for money, you're going out and getting money. Do you tell the folks that you work with, like, we can't do it this way because I would have looked at you all and said, no, we're not giving them money.
I mean, again, I've been in Urban Pathways for 5, 6 weeks. Started on
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
September 9th. Again, I'm waking up with a purpose, and that is serving New Yorkers who are in need. Have an amazing team at Urban Pathways, working with our Chief Program Officer, Jose Cotto, who really is grounded, a licensed social worker, understanding the needs of the folks that we serve, and just understanding that we as an organization want to build permanent and supportive housing because that is the solution to homelessness is housing. Excuse me. So, being in that arena, working with the communities, working with our elected officials is really just educating that this is why we're here. This is the work we're doing. We've been doing it for approaching 50 years. We want to continue to build communities, to be a partner with our legislative partners as well, and just really just moving the needle forward. This is hard work. This is not easy work. Um, Homelessness is not going away tomorrow, and let's be realistic. We know it's not. We live in New York City. That the vacancy rate for housing is like 1.4%. We need to build more.
Mm.
So being a partner and being a developer at Urban Pathways, it's really focused on building more so that way we can deliver more for the clients that we serve.
And as you're, I mean, it occurs to me that as a developer and as a nonprofit, there is a maze of legal rules and regulations that you have to abide by. But being a developer, even as a for-profit developer, that's like really hard stuff.
Yeah, and
Just
we're a
building
nonprofit.
things,
We're a
and you're a
nonprofit
nonprofit,
developer.
right? And just even if you're a for-profit, it's difficult. And you're a nonprofit developer. Uh, I mean, what is this? Could you speak to some of the challenges with that? Because I imagine the constraints are significant, particularly for the population that you serve.
The restraints are, but we learn and know how to navigate the system. And when I say navigate, understanding where the hiccups in the road will be and addressing those before we actually get there, right? Really sitting down and planning appropriately, working with our team internally to say, okay, what do we need in order to get this project off the ground? And we have a number of projects that we're working on now where housing is being developed for permanent and supportive housing for our clients, but working with the financial institutions, working with with the oversight at the state level, at the city level, working with our wonderful philanthropy world, right? Because they also contributes to our financial status as an organization. So bringing those all together, and honestly, Basil, is really being intentional and organized.
Mm.
That's what moves
And
forward.
can you tell us about some of the projects that are up or in the pipeline?
So we have a number. I don't want to be specific about which
I
ones,
understood. I understood.
but we do have a number of in the Bronx, in Manhattan, that we are looking forward to breaking ground and opening those locations for the communities that who are in need, and then bringing those I want to say formerly homeless individuals and giving them a new life, a new start, a fresh start in a new apartment where they can begin their lives.
Mm. Just as a reminder, there is a Q&A open, and you feel free to put any of your questions in the Q&A, and I will get to them. We do have one from Yezi. If you had to choose one place, where would you recommend I start in terms of getting acquainted with available RFPs or grants? Is there a central location for RFPs and grants, particularly from the city?
The Mayor Office of Contracts was MOX. You should go onto that website and see and register as well to so you can start receiving RFPs as they become available to see if you are interested and have the capacity to apply for it. So again, nyc.gov is the city's website. I would definitely utilize that website and see what's open in addition to SBS Small Business Solutions.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Small Business Solutions does this work for nonprofits.
Yeah, small. I mean, listen, SBS is a great organization. It's for small businesses, right? They focus, but they also have the authority to approve an organization as an MWBE because
Mm,
that's their charge, and they evaluate and they will make the decision to make you a city MWBE certified.
mm. Now tell me, this is sort of in your career. I mean, as you look back, is there anything specific in your work that prepared you for where you are now? I mean, you could say it's all the years in government, but one of some of the specific skill sets that you developed that have been really helpful to you in your day-to-day work. And I imagine, just going out and talking to elected officials, or at least on the flip side, going into these communities, it requires that you really know how to interact with people and know how to talk the language a little bit.
I think what prepared me most is when I became the administrator for the Human Resources Administration. That was a great responsibility and one that I truly enjoyed. I was over, the day-to-day operations of the Human Resources Administration, and that is all of the public benefits program, in addition to the Homelessness Prevention Administration that fell under HRA. And that's when I had the opportunity to really go out and have meaningful discussions with our elected officials, with our various nonprofit organizations, with our CBOs, and also just being exposed to the inner workings at City Hall. That's where I became when I got into that level of management. I was exposed to how City Hall actually operates and working with the various deputy mayors for Health and Human Services. And I want to give a big quick shout out to the current deputy mayor for Health and Human Services, Ann Williams Isom, who is amazing, and we as a city should thank her every day for the work that she does and her team, because it's so much responsibility, and I don't think that she as a deputy mayor gets enough credit.
Mm. I will definitely give her a shout out. Make sure that we send her a note and give her a shout out.
Thank you for that.
Just a couple of quick questions, and then we'll let you go. Kiana has another question. Once you've secured a grant and you're determining how to allocate funds, is there a benchmark for how much to go towards funding the services of your nonprofit versus staff, compensating staff? There is a benchmark. Yes.
Yeah, there's definitely a benchmark, and that is included in that RFP. So when you have those discussions with that particular grantor, or they would guide you on as far as staffing and where those funds are allocated for.
So it's not a set amount per se, but it may be, it will be determined largely by the project itself and the amount of money provided.
Absolutely. It's going to let you know how much to go for your director, for your case managers, for your, janitorial services, for your cook, for your case managers. It's going to break down. It's going to say this is the allotment for that particular title, and this is what you can spend. And you're going to decide, is it you need one, you need two, you need three, but just be careful as a nonprofit that you have that infrastructure and the correct resources in place in order to deliver.
Did you ever have to snatch anybody's funds and say, look, we got to stop this midway because we don't look like you could do what you said you were going to do?
No, I mean, as government, government really wants the nonprofits to be successful. So it's having those conversations, saying we're coming together. We're not saying the money being spent down. Why?
Mm. That's important. That's very important. And just last question or two. For the students that are here, some of them early in their career, some of them mid-career. We have some alum as well. Any advice just based on where we are in the world today, the work that they're doing or setting out to do, especially interacting with government and elected officials, any advice for our master students?
I said it earlier. This is not easy work, right? This is not work for the faint of heart. You have to really believe and trust that what you're doing is having a positive impact on the families and individuals that you serve. Building those relationships is important. Some folks say it's about the work, and it is about the work, and it is about you securing those funds so that your organization can continue to thrive. But in order to do that, I would encourage you to really make sure that you pay attention to building relationships and working with others to understand your particular organization and what your values are and what your mission is.
Mm. Anything on your mind, sir, that you want to make sure you get across? Well, you said it for our students, but anything that we should just pay attention to generally in terms of urban pathways or looking out for the city and where this field is going, where the space is going, whether it's grant making or grant writing?
So I would say, just for the nonprofit sector, a lot of times, you feel as though your work is being done in vain and not appreciated. Just always remember the reason why you stepped into the nonprofit sector. And I said the same for government. We can get beat up in the press, and it seems like one thing you do wrong is highlighted, and it really does not represent the real work that you're doing each and every day on behalf of the underserved. So stay focused.
Mm.
Continue to be a receiver to understand what are the needs of that particular population that you're serving, but also continue to look for those grants because they're out there, and then ask yourself, do I have the capacity to deliver on them? And if the answer is yes, then go for it, apply for it. And you don't need to go big fast, go small, get the experience, understand how government works. When I say government, that's local and state and federal. Mix it up, get those funds, and then work towards being an expert. Make sure you have your infrastructure in place. I can't stress enough to nonprofits. Make sure you have your compliance office in place. Make sure you have a controller, a great finance person to really track those funds. And then make sure you have a really good chief program officer who's looking and always looking for opportunities to improve your programs.
I know I said it was going to be my last question, but you said something now. This has to be my last question. You worked at city government. Is there anything specific to state and federal that may be very different, vastly different from what someone applying for a grant would see at the local level?
I mean, they're similar. City is, in my opinion, is more restrictive.
Mm.
State is somewhat gives you more flexibility. Federal, they want you to do the work and just go for it and get it done. And it's not a
Mm.
lot, from my experience, not a lot of restrictions on it.
Mm.
They really want you to be successful.
Mm. Okay. Commissioner, I can't tell you how important it is that you joined us for this conversation. This is our inaugural directors lunch, our inaugural brown bag. We're going to do this monthly. We hope that you come back at some point, maybe a year into the job, to tell us what it was like and to give us an update on the work that you're doing. Hopefully, you've broken ground on some of that stuff already, and maybe even invite us to the site. We'd love to take a look at the and do exactly what you said, which is actually come into the community and take a look at the work and meet people where they are. So I cannot thank you enough for taking a little while out of your day to join us for this inaugural brown bag, and to the students, alum, faculty, all those that joined us. Thank you so much for joining us for this hour. Commissioner Jenkins, again, thank you so much, and my best to your staff and all the good people at Urban Pathways.
Thank you so much. And again, we have our 50th gala anniversary coming up in April of 2025. I invite you all to come join us and see the work firsthand.
Oh, thank you. Get that information over to me, and we'll make sure to send it out to some folks. And is there and we'll also send your social media handles and so on, so folks can engage and follow your work. So
Okay.
again, thank you. Thanks so much, sir.
All right. Thank you. Take care,
All right.
everyone.
Take it out.